Hey, thanks for watching my video. Today we are going to replace the timing belts on a Ducati 800 SS. This is going to be the same procedure for most two-valve engines. These are probably the easier Ducatis to work on. Once you watch this video, you should be more secure and confident in believing that you can change the belts on your Ducati Monster, Superbike, Super Sport, whatever it is that you might be running. I did say Superbike, but the Superbikes typically have a 4-valve engine. Those are going to require a few more specialty tools. I'm only going to need one specialty Ducati tool for this job. And that's just going to be the nut wrench to move the cam and the main drive pulley. So what I'm doing right now is I've removed the screws which hold the timing belt covers on. And I've removed the belt cover for the vertical cylinder, and now I'm going to remove the screws so I can remove the belt cover for the horizontal. The vertical does have to come off before you can get to the horizontal. So the belts I'm using are just a generic set. I did not use Ducati belts. Once I open this up and you get a look at the belts that are on it, these belts are 12 years old. This bike is a 2007. This video was shot in January of 2019. So we're looking at the belts being 12 years, maybe just over 12 years old. They do feel like 12-year-old bolts or belts. I am afraid that if I would have ridden this bike with these belts on it, there's a good chance that as brittle as these belts were when I pulled them off, that just the RPMs from the engine at a regular ride pace probably would have destroyed at least the vertical belt. That one was in the worst condition. So what I say is if you're buying a Ducati, any Ducati, one of the first things you need to ask the owner is, have the belts been done? Ducati says like 15,000 miles or 2 years. I would agree with that just because that vertical cylinder gets so incredibly hot and it doesn't get a lot of cooling back there. And that's whether you're on a super bike or a regular 2-valve engine like this one. So this is what it looks like opened up. So what we're going to do now that we have the covers off is we're going to mark the belts with a paint stick. So the first thing I want to do, this is a Ducati tool that turns the pulleys. So it's actually the wrench that removes the nut that's on the pulleys. I'm going to use it to turn the main drive pulley to the timing mark. So what I did with the paint stick is I'm marking the timing mark that is on the drive pulley, and I'm going to match it up to a mark that is on the engine case. This is the timing mark on the vertical cylinder pulley, and then there's also a timing mark on the horizontal cylinder pulley. So my goal is to line these up, the drive pulley with the one on the crankcase, and then that gets the other two pulleys lined up on the belt somewhere. So I can mark them. So I feel it's very important to make sure that you get not only a good mark on the pulley and the belt, but also on the cylinder somewhere. This way, if your pulley on the cylinder spins just a little bit, you know where to spin it back to line it up. So if you have all three marks lined up, you know your timing's not going to be off any at all. I know this bike ran fine before I started doing this job, so I want to guarantee that the bike runs fine when this job is completed. So the best way to accomplish that is to check everything and recheck everything. And this video is going to be just about 24 minutes long. For time purposes, I've cut out quite a bit of just double checking that I've done. So you can see on this pulley the timing mark along with the hash mark on the engine. Now I'm marking my vertical belt with the timing mark on the pulley, and I'm going to extend my mark across onto the cylinder itself. So remember, these valves have springs on them, and as soon as you remove the belt from the pulley, that pulley is going to turn. And if you watch the video closely, when I remove the belts, you will see that both pulleys do turn off of their position where I have them set at. So now I'm marking the horizontal. The horizontal is going to be the first belt that you remove. And a little tip that I can give you is you need to get the back side of the belt marked. So take yourself a screwdriver and scrape off some of the paint stick, and you can actually mark the back side of the belt on that tooth. You can't use too much of the paint stick. Let me just tell you. You mark everything, double check everything, remark everything. One tiny little mistake, just getting one tooth off on these pulleys, you can really mess something up on your bike. So the money that you saved by doing this yourself, you could lose it pretty quickly just by having these marks in the wrong places. But again, I do not want to worry you, because this job, replacing these belts, what you're looking at right here, cost me about $71. So $71 as opposed to taking it to your favorite Ducati mechanic and giving him $800. You do the math. I think you can pull this off. So what I just did was I loosened the two bolts that hold the belt tensioner. And again, I'm marking everything again and making sure that everything's marked. Now this horizontal belt is going to come off. So typically these belts will just slide right off the pulleys. I told you that these belts are kind of crispy. They've been on the bike 12 years. So you see my marks, they're marked very well. So the next thing I'm going to do is get my new belts out. So I bought these belts from a place called Morocco for Speed in Germany, shipped to the United States. I paid $71. They were in my possession within a week. So huge thanks to the guy in Germany who packaged these up and sent them to me so quickly. I was able to pick these up off of eBay, but their website is www.marcoforspeed.de. That's MARROCCO 4, the number 4, speed, SPEED D is in Delta, E is in Echo. And you can find them again on eBay. So huge thanks for them for hooking me up with a decent product at a fairly quick speed. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the old belt. And the way I do it is from one mark, I count all the teeth on the belt till I get to the second mark. So I'm not going to tell you how many teeth I counted on mine, because it should differ from how many teeth you're going to count on yours. But if you follow the steps that I've shown you here, you won't have any problems replacing your belts. So I have my first mark on the belt, and I'm just going to count to the number that I counted on my old belt, and then I'm going to mark it off on my new belt. And I can't stress this enough. If your counting sucks as bad as mine does, count 2 or 3 times. Don't just do this once. Count it at least twice. Mark your belt. And all I can say is go back now from this mark that you just made and count the teeth backwards to the other mark. And I don't show this on the video, but I did do that. And I matched up my belts as well. I laid them on the floor and I matched up my belts and made sure that my marks matched exactly and my belts matched exactly. So now I'm going to jump on my vertical cylinder, and I'm loosening my my tensioner. I'm going to take a little bit of the paint stick, and if you can get one of those paint markers, that's great too, but those cost money. And if you've watched any of my videos, I'm not a big fan of spending money on things that I might use once or twice. And a paint pen, I can't see me getting a lot of life out of, because the paint tends to dry up before I use them, so I don't buy those anymore. Now this belt is extremely crispy, so it's going to take me a little bit more work to get this belt off the pulley. Again, let me just tell you, don't be scared of buying a Ducati. Don't be scared of doing your own belt job. Pay attention to what you're doing. You know, make notes. If you have to, take pictures. Shoot video like I'm doing, so you can go back and look at the video if you have any questions. Just take your time and do it, and you too can save a handful of money. But you see me, I'm forcing this belt. There's no reason, well, other than the previous owner just didn't have the time, or probably didn't know that Ducati belts needed to be changed on a regular basis. But don't be worried about buying a Ducati. As long as it's running, buy the bike, get it home, service it. There's nothing on a Ducati that you can't do. If I can do it, I know you can do it. So you see that belt, that pulley, it turned pretty good. So I'm just moving it back to kind of line it up, but it's not going to stay. I should have put some light on there just to show you how far off the timing mark on the pulley to the one on the side of the case is. But you get the hint. When you pull your belt off, the pulleys are going to turn. So here's my old belt, and this is an original Ducati manufactured belt, and I'm going to count the teeth on my belt. And I'm going to match it up to my new belt. And as you see, this belt has less teeth to count than my other belt does. So this is why I'm not going to give you how many teeth I counted on mine, because I don't want you to be sitting at your house counting out how many counts I did onto your belt. I need you to do this yourself for your machine. That way when you put your machine back together, it's identical to the way it was when you took it apart. Again, dude, I'm telling you, again, you can do this. So if you're watching this video, I already know that you're thinking about doing your own belts. Do your own freaking belts. Get a service manual. If you don't think this video is good enough, get a service manual and read how to do it yourself. But you can pull this off. That guy in the back room of the Ducati dealership who's taking $150 an hour to do this same job, if he can do it, you can do it. He's no better than you are. You bought a Ducati, so you're smart enough to be able to know that you can service your Ducati. So this vertical belt is the hardest one to do because that inner pulley is it's in there pretty far and it's really hard to see what you're doing. But once you get that lower pulley on the drive pulley lined up and it's good to go, then you can jump on that upper pulley. Just make sure that your marks are lined up 100%. I can't stress it enough. I'm going to keep telling you for the whole video. I can't stress it enough. So now I have my my wrench, and I'm just trying to line that pulley up so I can get it on there. And trust me, even with no tension on the belt, it's still pretty tight lining this thing up. So I'm giving this pulley just a little bit of a turn to line my marks up. And if you need to, grab a screwdriver just to get one of those other teeth lined up on the pulley so you'll slide it in a little bit better. You're not going to hurt the belt. The brand new belt, it's rubber, it's pliable. It'll be okay. Trust me, your screwdriver's not going to hurt this belt. Just get it on the teeth a little bit, just enough so you can slide it in. There you go. So go ahead and double check everything. Make sure your pulleys are good. Now there's a couple ways you can put tension on the belt. Now don't manhandle this belt. Don't use your gorilla strength and put as much tension as you can on this belt. Just get the belt tight and then tighten down your tensioner. Don't over tighten it. Just get it so the belt's tight. You just want the belt to be tight enough that it's not going to jump any teeth when you're going down the highway. So we're looking up underneath at the belt. We just want to make sure that our timing marks line up. And now we're going to jump onto our horizontal cylinder. So again, let's do the drive pulley first. It's typically the harder one to work with. And let's line up the first mark on the belt with the mark on the drive pulley. And as you'll see, this belt actually goes on a lot easier than the other one. If you're watching this, you made a good choice in motorcycles. Today was the first day that I got to ride this one. After I put the belts on this one, I installed a new Sergeant seat, and then I took this thing out for a test flight, and this is an amazing bike to ride. I can't wait to get it up in the mountains. All right, so we got our belt on, and again, I'm just tightening up the tensioner. You're watching me pry with the small screwdriver. I'm not prying that hard. Look, the belt's not so stiff that I can't wiggle it. Again, there's a torque spec for these too, but it's not that much. So just tighten it down to where it's snug. You don't have to over torque. You don't have to over torque those bolts that hold the tensioner down. You just got to get them both snug. They won't go anywhere. There's a piece of software called Ducati Diag, and you can install that on a laptop. And if your mic's good, that software will actually listen to the harmonics on the belt and tell you if you got them adjusted properly. But again, there's really no need. The belts are pliable. They'll be okay. Just don't over tighten the tensioner. So here we go. We got the bike back together. I fired it up. This is probably the third time I've started the bike since I've owned it. Just because I knew the belts were so old and I didn't want to risk breaking anything, breaking a belt or damaging something. Typically when I do a belt job, I'll warm the bike up first, and then I'll take the bike apart while it's warm. I didn't do that today because it's like 30 degrees outside, and I have to open up the garage to let the bike run, and I was having a hard enough time getting my garage warmed up. So here's the cover for the horizontal. I did put a sticker on it telling the date that the belt was changed and the mileage. This bike's only got 8,020 miles on it. Not very many miles. I typically do all my services in intervals of 3. I don't think that's Ducati's thing, but I typically will do my belts at 15,000 miles. I'll ride a bike probably 2 years on 15,000 miles. I've got so many bikes, it's kind of difficult for me to ride all of them and put massive amounts of miles on it. But I do my oil changes every 3,000 miles. I'll check the valves. On this bike, I'm not really worried about the valves, 2-valve. I'm pretty sure that this bike's never been ridden hard. I can just look at the bike and tell it's never been abused. So I will pull this back apart at 15,000 miles. Depending on how long from now it is for me to get 15,000 miles, I may or may not replace the belts then while I do the valves. But when you do the valves, typically I like to warm the valves up. I like to warm the engine up before I tear it apart to check my spacing in the valves. I'd rather do it warm than cold. That video will probably come about, I don't know, next December if I still have the bike. This bike will go up for sale. I've got a number in my head. I'm only lacking a few more things for the bike. Exhaust, I have RPM exhaust coming from Italy, so you'll see me do that video soon. That should look pretty good. And then I have black shorty levers that I'm going to put on it. Other than that, I'm done going through this bike. I will ride it fairly hard when it starts warming up, and then decide if I need to rebuild the front end. I did buy fork seals and new wipers for the forks. because it does have 12-year-old oil in the forks, I do need to replace that. But I figure my first hard ride out in the mountains, I'll probably blow at least one fork seal, and that'll let me know how I need to set up the suspension also. So I'll do all that at one time. I may or may not post up the video for fork seals. Fork seals are actually pretty easy to do. If you have the proper tools, you can knock fork seals out in a couple hours. Especially on this bike, as easy as everything comes apart on it. But I'm just tightening up all the screws for the covers. Thanks for watching. I hope you watch some of my other videos, and congratulations on owning such a great bike.